Hello and a very warm welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining this very special web seminar. My name's David Roth from WPP and it's my pleasure to be your host for today's web seminar for the launch of the WPP BAV Best Country Study 2024-5. We've got a lot to get through. During the course of the webinar, we'll also be travelling across continents and getting the expert views from WPP company specialists from Asia, Africa, Australia, the Americas and more. So let's get going. The WPP Best Country Study is now in its 9th year, so we've got lots of comparative data to be able to really assess how the tectonic plates of change across the world are playing out in terms of how countries are perceived across the world. The Best Country Study is done in collaboration with Wharton Business School and US News, which enables us to have the strongest academic rigour to the study and its analysis, and a big thank you to Professor David Ribstein of Wharton Business School for his work and dedication to the study in this year and previous years. We really do appreciate it, Dave. Of course, nation branding itself is nothing new. The Romans were past masters at it. All you needed to see was the SPQR and the Roman insignia to know exactly what that meant if you were a country that was about to be invaded by the Roman Empire. But what is new is being able to measure a country brand. We bring nation brands to life with a combination of the largest brand perception study in the world, the WPP BAV study, with the largest nation branding study, the WPP BAV Best Country Study. And combining these two data sources provides an unrivaled way of defining and quantifying nation brands. The Best Country Study alone contains some 73 descriptive attributes, 26 rankings, 9 years of learnings, and covers 89 countries. Combine that with the 31 years of the BAV study, covering 63,000 brands and 75 brand metrics, and you can see what a powerful combination of data that we draw upon to create the WPP BAV Best Countries series. Our study is unique because it also contains the largest global panel, 16,960 respondents from business decision makers to the general population. And the fact that the study is tied to GDP growth. It also gives you many ways of segmenting the audience. It provides strategic insights that pinpoint the most productive pathways to drive a country's reputational growth and GDP growth, both, and give you the lasting ability to be able to drill down to industry-level insights with the only global study measuring worldwide consumer preference for products from a particular country of origin. Now, nations, of course, can be thought of as brands, and like brands, nations need to stand for something different. Art, culture, people, gastronomy, geography and business all contribute. And just like consumer brands and business brands, they need to be managed to prevent stereotypical associations from dominating. We're seeing as the world starts to reinvigorate after the COVID pandemic that many more countries around the world are beginning to reassess how they need to be seen in order to take advantage of the new opportunities globally for trade and inward and outward investment. How they're seen, their nation brand, is an important ingredient in the ability to be able to take advantage of those opportunities and to create nation strategies to best position them for growth in an era where growth is going to become more difficult to obtain. Equally, brands must understand the optimum balance of leaning into or out of their country of origins associations as part of their strategic positioning. One of the key aspects of the study is our analysis of the country brand factors that drive GDP growth. These driving high-powered factors are power, agility, cultural influence, entrepreneurship, heritage, social purpose, quality of life, movers, adventure, and open for business. And what we've seen over the course of the 9 years of our study is that soft power is becoming simply more important than the historical hard power. This year, for the very first time, the movers factor is the highest single component of the driver of GDP growth. Well, to find out what the top 9 key trends of this year's BAV WPP Best Country Study is, I can think of no better person to have a conversation with than John Keaveney, who is responsible for the Best Country Study at WPP BAV and also the BAV Global Innovation Director. John, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, David, for having me.
Now, John, you've had the luxury of being able to review the data as you've been analysing it. And now I know I suppose it's a little bit unfair to ask you, given the wealth of insights that's inside Best Countries, but can you take us on a very helicopter view of what you see the top 9 insights and takeaways for 2025 are?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Jumping straight in, the first is the need to stand out from other countries has never been so important. We know this because of our dimension called Movers, which is measuring a country's distinctiveness, uniqueness and dynamism in the world, is now the number 1 weighted driver to GDP in our model. In fact, the Movers dimension has moved up from 5th place to 1st place in just 1 year. This has never been seen before. Number 2 is closely aligned, but it is different. A country being seen as agile is now the number 1 driver of business investment decisions. Again, this is a first. This hasn't been seen before. And in fact, the agile dimension alone can explain 87% of the business investment decisions we observe within our data, which is huge.
But why do you think agility has grown so strongly this year?
I'm not entirely sure, but it seems to be the world's changing. People are more aware of what countries do nowadays. And you need to be, which in our agile dimension measures, you need to be responsive, adaptable. We see this in brands, and now clearly it's moving to countries. You need to be ahead of problems rather than be changed by them.
I think that's a really interesting point, because we have seen it over the course of the last few years, especially during the pandemic and after the pandemic. The brands that are growing really fast are the ones that are perceived and seen as being amazingly agile, a new skill that brands have to learn. Okay, number 3.
Yes, the third is cultural influence. Cultural influence remains the number 1 driver of tourism, which may not be a big surprise, but what will be a surprise, it's a very significant driver of business investment decisions as well. Last year, in fact, it was in joint 1st place, driving tourism and business. Agility is now overtaken, but cultural influence is important, not just for tourism, for business as well. The 4th insight is consumer brands help shape a country's culture. That means projecting the culture abroad, and this is especially true in Asia. We know this by looking at one of our personal opinion statements on the topic, where we know 89% of Asians agree with the statement, consumer brands play an important role in defining a country's culture. This, for reference, compares to 76% who agree who are European.
You make an interesting point, John, about the personal opinion statements. There are quite a lot of them on Best Countries. I know that's an area where a lot of people miss and don't see them. It's a great place to go for some great insights, isn't it?
100%, David. It's a treasure trove, but as you say, most people are not aware of. We have statements to do with the climate, to do with social issues, from social justice to gender. Yeah, please check them out. There's a number we have, well over 30, which will give you great sound bites for any presentation.
Next.
No, yep, the 5th insight is slightly negative, but don't worry, I end on a positive.
Thank goodness for that.
Yes, nearly 40% of the world's population, according to our data, is pessimistic about the future. Probably no surprise during the times what we're going through, but through our data, we know 39% disagree with the statement, I believe the next generation will have a better life. Now, who might come to the rescue is brands, according to our data. We know consumer brands are trusted more than governments to help society. We know this through our data, and again, yet another personal opinion statement. 79% of global citizens agree with the statement, I trust consumer brands to have a positive impact on society. So that's 79%, and that compares with only 71% who agree with a similar statement, I trust the government to have a positive impact on society. So brands clearly have a role to play to help with this current pessimistic mood. Number 7, global preference to Chinese goods is increasing year on year. Even if I only look back a few years post-COVID, say 2021, preference to Chinese goods was at 29%, and now it's risen to 37%. And let me stress, this is not consideration to a Chinese-made good. This is preference. This is very significant for China and its brands.
To what extent, John, do you think it's been driven by the growth around the world in the Chinese electric automotive industry?
But I think you've answered the question, David. This is clearly brands play a role in projecting countries, and clearly brands which are becoming global powerhouses help shape overall preference and perceptions of a country and what it means to be made in. I recall being made in China never used to have such a positive association with innovation and quality, and today it is. And then absolutely, those exports seem to be more in the tech space, from internet commerce to actual including e-cars. So yeah, the world's changing, and tech brands are helping change that preference and perception of China. Number 8, this looks at, or we were found that there's a significant perceptual gap that exists when comparing global versus regional views. This is especially true in sub-Saharan Africa and LATAM. Put simply, how the world perceives countries from a given region is very different to how people from those countries and regions perceive themselves. Now, this could be based on ignorance. This could be based on stereotypes. But it's very important to note that particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and LATAM, the gap is huge, on averaging from 18 to 21 places. Whereas in contrast, North Americans rank the USA down 5 places. But to be fair, Brand USA is a very powerful brand, and it's ranked 3rd overall.
And finally, John.
Finally, there's lots of talk regarding AI, but at least according to our data, it's net positive. In fact, 2/3 of the world's population see the benefits of AI and not its threats. Again, we know this for a personal opinion statement. 67% agree with the statement, the benefits of AI outweigh the threats. And that's it, David. I hope you and the audience found that interesting.
Well, John, thanks very much. It's given us a lot of context to understand a little bit more details during the course of today's webinar. But for the moment, John, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You'll be back a little bit later. So now I think it's time for us to reveal in rank order the WPP BAV best countries for 2024-5. Well, I'm glad to say we now have two additional guests joining John and myself. Firstly, Jane Renandi, who is the BAV Director of Asia, and Dr. Michael Sussman, who is the Chief Product Officer of BAV. A very, very warm welcome to you both. Thanks very much indeed for joining.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thanks, David.
Michael, let's start with you. I mean, you've been living in the States for a lot of years, in New York in particular. You are a brand expert. You're also a country brand expert. We've seen the US increase several places this year. What do you think has driven this significant amount of change for the US?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, and we've definitely moved up. And when you start to look at the data, it seems like the world is seeing us a bit more responsive and acting more like a leader than we have been in the past. We are up on number one on connected to the rest of the world now from number two. So we're up a slot there. We're up on being a leader, on being trendy, being responsive. We moved up to number two. Has strong consumer, but just kind of leading the way versus just standing aside. And I think the political climate has maybe forced our hand to take a more engaged involvement in this. And I think it's showing in terms of what kind of leader we are as a nation.
Interesting. I mean, one of the many things that the Best Countries study helps us do is to understand what the country of origin means. I know you've been working closely in this area, and of course certain brands in certain categories are much more aligned with their country of origin than others. But from your observation, Michael, what would you what helps us to explain what Made in America means for 2024 from this year's study?
Sure. Made in America is a really powerful asset for sure. It means a lot to the world, no matter how you feel about America as a political being, who we are as a consumer product nation and the brands we create. I mean, I think we rank number one on has strong consumer brands. So it means a lot. And again, it doesn't matter how you feel about America. It's just the products that come out of us in technology and spirits, so wines and liquors, and cultural influence. Those things like entertainment are really important. And some of the brands that are American brands, and clearly American brands, really depict American culture to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world is absorbing it. Brands like Disney, brands like Apple, Marvel, Coca-Cola, Netflix. These are brands that are not only in people's living rooms around the world, but they're showing you a glimpse of brand America and the brands of products we use. So it's a very powerful asset. It continues to grow, and it's exciting to see the value there.
I'm assuming, Michael, it's a two-way reaction, is it? I mean, brands can help brand America, and brand America can help brands.
Oh, absolutely. It's very synergistic. And I think some of our strengths reflect Hollywood and reflect the things that we've created and reflect Apple's ingenuity for sure.
Now, looking at a broader picture, it's hard not to notice a divide in America. From the study, do you see there's more that unites Americans than divides them?
It feels very divided because we're in the middle of an election. And so when we looked at that, it's a bit surprising because if you think about our values on a normal curve, no matter who you are, Democrat or Republican, most of our values are in the big fat center part of that curve. We're all aligned on most of the fundamentals. It's those extremes on the fringe that are pulling us apart a bit, things around diversity, things around our borders. So, and it feels like, the election's really leaning into those fringes and pulling us apart. But again, we're more similar than we are different if you look at our data holistically.
Now, Michael, you've been using Best Countries for 9 years. I think it's fair to say without you, Best Countries wouldn't have happened. What advice would you give to people on how best to use the Best Countries data and the insights that you can derive from it to build robust country and brand strategies?
Sure. Yeah. There's so much. I think John alluded to some of this already. There's so much great, rich data here. So now, from a tourism perspective, again, there's so many ways you can look at it. We measure tourism, we measure those types of things, adventure, so on, those types of things. So there's a lot of power there. But in terms of brands, it's important to know, first of all, how does the nation see brand America? Do we want to lean into that? Or do we want to, keep our brands independent from our nation? A lot of nations love us and a lot of them don't. So it's about seeing first of all, how do they feel about you, and then seeing how they think about our brands. And there are some categories, technology, again, entertainment, where we are really powerful. And how can we harness and lean into that a bit, because it is very influential. I think we rank, in terms of cultural influence, we rank number three out of all the countries we measure. So that influence it spreads so much further than just the products, and so how do you tie the two together, the brand and the country, because it is powerful.
Well, Michael, thank you very much indeed. We'll be rejoining you in a minute, but I think now is a good time to take a look at the countries that have had their biggest change over the past year, from last year's best countries to this one in 2024-5. Jane, let's specifically talk about Asia. Within Asia, which countries are leading the rankings, and what are the key factors behind those top positions?
Within Asia, Japan takes the lead as the second best country in the world overall, followed by Singapore at number 14, China at number 16, and South Korea at number 18. Japan in particular excels in our entrepreneurship and cultural influence metrics, while Singapore scores high in agility and being open for business, not surprisingly. China and South Korea both perform very, very well in the movers and power categories. And quite notably, these countries also occupy 4 of the top 7 positions globally in innovation, technological expertise, and digital infrastructure. These perceptions have likely been formed by prominent tech brands from these nations, brands that we all know very well, like Samsung, LG, Huawei, Nintendo, and Alibaba.
I think it's really interesting when you look at the dimensions that Asian countries have increased in, and then look at the brands that are coming out of those countries. There's an amazing synergy between the two.
Definitely. It seems that these brands really exemplify the things that the outside world view Asian countries as good at.
Now, moving into that area, I think, do you think there's a difference in how Asian countries perceive themselves compared to how they're viewed and perceived by non-Asian countries? I mean, what does best countries tell us about that? Does it shine a light?
Sure. Indeed, David, there are significant disparities between how Asian countries view themselves and how the outside world, outside of Asia, view Asian countries. Most Asian countries in our study perform better regionally than on a global scale. For instance, India ranks 23rd in the region, but drops to 33rd worldwide. Similarly, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam also rank about 10 places higher when rated by Asian respondents versus global respondents. Singapore does exceptionally better in the region. It outperforms Japan as the second best country in the world, bested only by the United States. Japan, while ranked second by global respondents, falls to the 10th place among regional respondents who perceive it as less dynamic, less entrepreneurial, and not as economically stable compared to global views. China, which ranks 16th globally, is number 9 among Asian respondents. Asian respondents see it as more culturally accessible, more responsive, but it is not as quite as cost effective. In terms of low manufacturing costs, for example, China drops from number 2 among global audiences to number 9 among Asian respondents, trailing behind Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines.
So I suppose it's not too surprising that Asian countries have significantly better detail than about their fellow Asian countries than other markets. But it also, I think, shows there's a massive gap between perception and reality as well. Finally, Jane, what do you think are the standout insights from this year's study concerning Asia?
Well, one notable observation from the data is that despite the strong global presence of Asian origin brands, respondents outside of the Asia region perceive Asian countries as less culturally accessible than regional respondents do, with an average of 28 rank point difference. This lack of cultural connections, as you may guess, poses significant challenges both for Asian brands aiming to enhance their global appeal, as well as for non-Asian companies seeking to engage with Asian consumers, which, by the way, is expected to represent a $10 trillion opportunity by 2030. Definitely not a market that any growth-focused company would want to miss out on. Our Best Country study serves as an excellent resource for gaining valuable consumer insights into various countries, including those in Asia.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Jade. But moving on to John, maybe. John, what relevance does the study have for consumer brands? I think everybody, Jane and Michael have touched on it. But if you had to sum it up, what would you say?
Yes, David. All of our let's call them panelists have made the comment, and as I stated earlier, brands project culture abroad. But I'd summarize it to say that consumer brands and country brands are intrinsically or intricately linked. It's very hard to think of Chanel without French style. It's very, very hard to think of Mercedes and BMW without associations with German engineering. And to sum it up, I can quote another personal opinion statement we have. I'm trying to push those at the moment. 77% of global, yes, 77% of our global respondents agree with the statement, a country a product is made in impacts my preference to purchase it. So in summary, understanding the relationships a brand has with its country of origin are key.
And finally, a question to you all, I think. What surprised you the most when you were reviewing the insights from this year's study? Let's start with you, Jane.
Yeah, I think I really didn't expect the discrepancy between how people outside of the region view Asia and how people within Asia view Asia. I think Asia as a continent has really grown very, very quickly in the past 30 years. Especially in terms of the consumer group. I read somewhere that by 2030, about 70% of Asia's population is expected to join the consuming class, up from just 15% in the year 2000, which will drive half of global consumption growth. So I think it's very exciting. It's an exciting time for Asia.
A couple of things surprised me. One is personal. I'm a diehard avid snowboarder, and I'm a little bit bummed that the USA ranked, 38 when it was number ones and twos on adventure. And I know there's a lot of great adventure in parks and mountains. So I was surprised, but again, maybe it's media. But the bigger thing was, again, doing some of this work, I was amazed at how different a country, like we're brand's a brand, no matter, like people see Apple around the world pretty consistently. They see Ford, they see Coca-Cola, right? They kind of get what they mean. But Brand America, while it stands for something holistically, some disparity around the world is amazing. And that tells me a little bit about the power of media, right? Because people are getting different perspectives depending on where they are. And you see a lot of that in this data, that national media is really shaping how everybody sees everybody else. And those differences are amazingly large sometimes, and it's fascinating.
To me, it's actually the very first insight I went through. It's the change in movers as a predictor of GDP. Technically, movers has increased as a predictor of future forecasted GDP. It always sits around the 5th or 6th mark. Becoming number one is a surprise. It was also a surprise to our partners in crime, US News World Report and Wharton, and I had to explain the justification, but it really is a surprise, but it's there, it's in the data, and it's something we all should not have, we should embrace rather than pretend it didn't happen.
Well, John, Jane and Michael, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Also, thank you very much for your expert views and analysis, which you could also, all of you, read in our Best Countries summary report. And I'll give you a little bit more details at the end of the broadcast as to how you can get hold of that. But Jane, John and Michael, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
David.
David.
Pleasure.
Well, I said at the top of the broadcast that we would be travelling the world, so let's start our journey now.
Thank you, David. So, if we would look at the results of the countries report and related to Belgium. Out of the data, we see that Belgium is perceived as a very vibrant and progressive country, renowned for its exceptional quality of life, with its strong emphasis on social purpose and human rights. Belgium stands out as a nation deeply committed to the well-being and dignity of all its citizens. The country is not only culturally very accessible, but also a leader in promoting racial equity and gender equality, reflecting its dedication to inclusivity and fairness in all its aspects of life. Known for its welcoming business environment, Belgium is open for enterprise and innovation, fostering an economy where companies and entrepreneurs thrive. Belgium is very strategically located in Europe, and this makes it highly connected internationally, playing a key role in global diplomacy and commerce. Education in Belgium is of a high standard, with a robust system that provides equal opportunities for learners of all backgrounds, cultivating a well-informed and skilled population. The country also places a strong focus on caring for its communities, ensuring that social welfare and healthcare system are inclusive and accessible to everyone. Belgium is a very multicultural society. It celebrates diversity and values cooperation. It's a little bit perceived as a model for progressive policies and very open to global citizens. Belgium is committed to human rights, cultural engagement, and social equity. Belgium continuously works towards creating a more just, inclusive, and prosperous future. Despite its many strengths, Belgium often struggles to stand out as a distinctive or unique destination. It's a country that is sometimes overlooked when it comes to vibrant trends, dynamic energy, or a reputation for being especially fun or exciting, even if we host the famous festival like Tomorrowland. It lacks the edgy, modern allure associated with trendy destinations, and its understated character can come across as unremarkable to those seeking high-energy experiences. The country's image is also not tied to breathtaking landscapes or dramatic scenery. Belgium's natural beauty is more subtle and understated, without the iconic views or striking vistas found in other European nations. This often makes it less appealing for those in search for visually captivating destinations. Out of the study, we can recognize that despite the rich tapestry of history, Belgium's cultural heritage is not always perceived as deeply resonant or evocative. It lacks the grandeur of Italy's Renaissance or France's romantic legacy. making it feel less compelling from a cultural tourism perspective. While it's home to a variety of historical sites and artistic treasures, be it in Brussels, in Bruges, in Liège, Antwerp, and so on, Belgium is often overshadowed by the more prominent cultural landmarks of our neighbors. In essence, Belgium's appeal is more subdued and refined, and it may not capture the imagination of those seeking bold, dramatic, or visually thrilling experiences, which is a pity. So this was it, David. Thank you very much for the study again, and appreciate that we can now pitch the results of these studies and present them to our clients and our colleagues.
What I thought was really interesting in this year's country study, with regards to the Middle East and North Africa, are these two emerging narratives that are coming through. So from the outside looking in, people see innovation, people see something that is forward thinking and forward looking, and that's driven by projects like NEOM and the line, these hugely futuristic, these hugely innovative developments where they are really challenging our concept of spaces, of places, and of buildings and the way we interact with each other, whether it's for work or health or education or leisure. But then when you speak to people closer to home, in the region, what rings true for them is heritage, it's tradition, it's cultural ancestral. So I think there's an opportunity for brands to think about how we can be forward facing and we can speak to innovation, but also we can be rich in culture, we can be rich in tradition, we can be rich in history and show the world what it is that makes this region a tapestry of so many exciting flavors, of ideas, of personalities, and of cultures.
Yeah, the big story coming out of Best Countries 2024 is that there is a huge discrepancy between the lived reality of sub-Saharan Africans and the global perception thereof. There is up to a 21 place differential between the perceptions of sub-Saharan Africans of sub-Saharan Africa and the global perception thereof. What this is showcasing is that there is one of two things at play here. One, there is still a negative perception of Africa that reigns to this day, but more than that, that there is a huge lack of knowledge of the continent. In fact, what Best Countries 2024 highlighted to us is that most of the knowledge acquired of sub-Saharan Africa is coming through sport, which is a powerful medium to market the continent. And sure, we've seen that through the likes of the Kenyan greats at the Olympics, the Springboks winning back-to-back Rugby World Cups, as well as AFCON and players playing in European leagues. But some things are still not translating. Quality of life, rich heritage, as well as the huge amount of adventure possibilities on the continent are not translating through. And that's a big challenge for sub-Saharan Africa. If we're going to start off with a double click, we better start off with the positive news, right? And that is news coming straight out of South Africa. Last year, she was at 46th place in the overall index, and this year she has taken up the 40th place, growing by 6 places. Additionally to that, South Africa has grown by 10 places in the movers dimension and 5 within the agility dimension. What this is reflecting is this renewed on the ground hope zeitgeist in South Africa, and that comes alongside this new government of national unity that has been formed. The negative side, though, is that there is still a 19 place discrepancy. When Africa rated within best countries, they all rated South Africa as the 21st best country, which is a place that Austria currently holds this year. And the reason for it being 21 in the eyes of Africa is that it is seen as a happy, friendly, and fashionable place. If we move on to Kenya, which is the second best country within sub-Saharan Africa, there wasn't a year-on-year change. So the country stayed on the 59th place within the best countries report. However, there is a huge discrepancy where Africa would rate Kenya as the 37th best country, which is currently held by Poland. And this is due to sub-Saharan Africans noting the great quality of life that Kenyans actually experience. So this discrepancy of 22 places is really quite sad, because when we look at where the world rated Kenya as its best was on cheap manufacturing, which is really a disservice to the country itself. When we move to the west, however, there is a 30-place discrepancy for Ghana. It is the fourth best country within the sub-Saharan African region, but sadly it has fallen 4 places to 73rd. And this is being replaced by Myanmar. When Africa rates within the best countries report, it would rate it as 43rd best country in the world, and that is because of its social responsibility and the amount of adventure that you can experience within Ghana. However, when the world scored Ghana, as well as Cameroon for that matter, they scored them pretty much the lowest on all of the best countries dimensions. This is really a twofold answer. So firstly, for sub-Saharan Africa and its countries, let's make 2024 and 2025 a year where we can take back control of the narrative and educate the world on what they're actually missing out on in this vibrant region, especially when it comes to its heritage and the plethora of adventure possibilities that exist. The second part of that answer is that for the world, it means that it needs to make 2024 and 2025 a time to check blind spots and biases and really be open to explore this really exciting region and really see all that you've actually been missing out on. So go and experience the difference between your perception before and the lived reality on the ground, like we do in sub-Saharan Africa.
Thank you, David. I'm Ekalak from Thailand. Our APAC countries are globally recognized as rich of heritage, strong social support, and impressive quality of life. Meanwhile, some emerging markets like India, Indonesia, and Vietnam are fueling global GDP with their rapid growth, opening new doors to new business investment, trade, and new business expansions. Our BV study on the world's most influential brand also support our APAC mover image. Besides the well-known brands like Samsung, there are new rising stars like TikTok and Shein that are emerging in the top 20 world rank with the innovative and contemporary image appeal. These two image qualities are important in connecting to Asian consumer heart and shaping up the future of branding in Asia. However, there is the side that the world doesn't see, a gap between the global perception and how we in Asia see ourselves as a mover. Asian is on the move, especially for China, South Korea, and Japan. They are leading the wave of change and unlocking exciting new economic opportunities.
We use the best countries data all the time in Australia and New Zealand. We have a number of tourism clients like Tourism New Zealand, Events Queensland, Jetstar, who love knowing where Australia and New Zealand rank on global standing. We're even using it with a lot of our banking and retail clients who love the information, and it's a fantastic way to look at the way Australia and New Zealand show up when compared to the rest of the world. Now, we're really delighted with this year's scores. Out of the 86 countries, Australia came 5th and New Zealand 9th. It's wonderful to crack the top 10 with both countries. And there were some differences between how we ranked. And if I start with Australia ranking number 5, We're seen as having a really powerful economy, a modern country, entrepreneurial, good place to live, great weather, all things that we think about Australia as well, but really a great place to come and get a job, which is really wonderful to know. And if we look at New Zealand ranked 9th, they did incredibly well on being a progressive nation, family friendly, terrific weather, in fact better than Australia's, and a lovely place that's progressive and really good for racial harmony, which is not surprising given that roughly 20% of the population is Pacifica and Maori. So they're really terrific results for both of our countries. Now, the one thing that was really interesting is that outside of Australia and New Zealand, we're seen to have incredible sporting prowess. You ask an Australian and we just think that's pretty average. And I think that's really interesting because it basically shows that we've kind of forgotten how terrific we are on the global stage. Great rugby, great cricket, great Olympians. Perhaps we Australians and New Zealanders have taken it for granted because the rest of the world sees that sporting prowess and we don't see it as much. And finally, the one measure that we could probably both improve on, both of our countries, is the metric that talks about movers. We could probably stand to be a little bit more dynamic, a bit more ambitious. The dynamism is something that we're going to probably lean heavily into, and both of our countries might be seen to be doing a little bit better in that in the next year's scores.
"2024 saw brand France on the centre stage during the Summer Olympics. The torch is now being handed off to Los Angeles and then to Brisbane. It's never too early to start planning how a world event like the Olympics can positively have an impact on your country brand. So let's hear from Adam Kennedy, Brisbane, Australia.
Thanks, David. Overall, Australia ranked 5th in Best Countries 2024, just one place down from 2023's all-time high of 4th. But digging into the data, does the world think Australia is ready for the Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games when 4 billion people will turn their eyes down under? Well, there's some good news, but there's also a way to go in some areas. Many of Australia's classic strengths as a nation remained. We're seen to be safe, fun, friendly, a place I'd like to live and good for tourism. They all sat comfortably in the top 10 globally. But there were notable declines too. Leader dropping to an all-time low of 18. Unique now at number 39, the lowest result by some margin since Best Countries began in 2016. And even Happy, historically a very high-scoring attribute for Australia, has slipped to its lowest ever result, now at number 9. Away from the sporting arena, inflation, housing affordability and the cost of living crisis have dominated the headlines here, just like elsewhere in the world. And perhaps it's these financial pressures that have resulted in Australia being seen as more expensive to many around the world, now an eye-watering number 64 for affordable. One of the biggest moments of the year here in Australia was the referendum to alter the constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament. In the Best Countries survey, Australia slipped to 12th for racial equality, our lowest result on record, and perhaps a signal that the country still has a way to go when it comes to racial equality, particularly for a nation where over 50% of people are first or second generation migrants. For a country that's sports mad though, it was a particularly big year. Here in Australia, support for the Matildas, the Australian women's soccer team, reached fever point in the Women's World Cup. Despite this, Australia slipped to number 20 globally for athletically talented on the Best Countries list, and number 14 for health conscious as a nation, our lowest ever result. Perhaps this will improve next year after Australia's best ever Olympic Games in Paris with 18 gold medals. Either way, there's still time for Australia to level up before the Olympic and Paralympic Games come to our shores in 2032.
Well, thank you very much indeed for those highly impactful insights. It just goes to show the immense amount of areas the study covers and the insights that you can generate from it that can really help you get a better understanding of country brands. It also shows what amazing talent we have at WPP companies right across the world. Many thanks indeed for everyone that contributed. Well, there's one thing having a lot of data and insights, and there's quite another getting access to it all. We at BAV have spent a lot of time creating for you a way of getting best countries data and insights at your fingertips for you to use for clients, new business, and, of course, thought leadership. All of this data is available to you 24/7 from the BAV Analytics platform, The Font. Just log in using your Okta username and passwords. In addition to the world of BAV data, you'll now also be able to access the best countries data and insights and all our new automated tools, many of them powered by AI through WPP Creative Studios. Now, there's nobody better to help us understand what's there and how you can use it than Eric, who's our BAV technology partner and developer. Eric, a very warm welcome. Thank you very much indeed for joining us from your home country of Sweden. How's Sweden doing in this year's study?
Well, we've declined a bit since last year, I'm sad to say, but we're still keeping in the top 10, so I'm happy.
Good. Well, Eric, what have we created this year to really help people get instant data and instant insights?
This year, we've added quite a lot of new features to the Best Countries Data Hub on the Found. We have added many new perspectives that we'll be taking a look at in a minute or so. And we've added lots more audiences and deep dives for you to get more out of the data.
So I think the overall principle, isn't it, is that we want to make sure that you can get to the data at any level, a very sort of top line instant access, but also if you want to do some deep dives on respondent level type analytics in terms of audiences, that's possible for you to do as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, so rather than talk about it, let's show it. Let's give everybody a feel for what's available on the Font. All you have to do is to just log in using your standard Okta credentials to the BAV Analytics platform called the Font, and this world is opened up for you.
And when you get on the Found, all you do is look for the best country section on the sidebar, where you get taken into all of the best countries data. In the hub, you will find different types of analysis. And as we've said, we've added more than ever this year. In each of the raw data sections here at the top, you can get all the rankings across all of our best countries data. You can, for example, identify how opinions and perceptives shift across countries. This is using our opinion statements, which goes into a detailed agree to disagree scale. And you can scrub through all of the statements that we cover, compare them across time, and look at it across audiences. Or if you want to, you can also go and create your very own audience in the audience creation panel. Pick from all our demographic and personal opinion questions that are part of the study to create this.
I mean, I think that's, again, we were talking slightly earlier, that people don't quite realise that there's a lot of personal opinion statements in the study, but also now that you can create an audience based on their personal opinion.
Absolutely, and using these personal opinion statements, I think, they extend so much further than just country branding. They extend to any type of brand and client work we do, and trying to understand how people, perceive social, economic, business, and branding statements across the world. And then there's the actual country data. We've got our country and city data, which you can interrogate in any sort of way that you want. You can view all the factors that we have, the 10 factors that correlate with GDP growth, and dive into all the 78 attributes that in turn we take to make up these 10 factors, each providing obviously invaluable insights on each country. In addition to creating your own audience, you can also just select from one of either your saved audiences or one of the audiences that we've created for you to save you some time doing the analysis in here. The final raw data section we have is our origin index, which helps you look at which categories of products people prefer across to what they prefer buying across different markets. So which are the top markets in the world for people when it comes to buying beer, financial services, spirits, and much more. In the best country section, there's also all of our deep dives, and they help you unlock even more value and more growth for your clients. And I want to highlight just a couple of examples, and I hope that you'll find some time to dive into all of these on your own. And I want to highlight our two newest Turbo Pitches deep dives that we've added to the best country section this year. Our first is the consideration drivers. And the consideration drivers helps you identify which country perceptions are the drivers in why people, for example, consider doing business or visiting a country in comparison to either a regional view or maybe your client's competitive set of markets. And again, just like all our tools, you can look at this for any audience, such as nationalities, generations, business decision makers, and more. And in this, obviously, the sort of key area to be is in the top right corner, and where you can easily then see the type of statements and the type of factors across each country, and what to improve, for example, business. You can also have a deep look at this in our opportunity index, which is one of my favorite new features of best countries this year. The business opportunity index helps you identify key markets to target, for example, doing business or tourism campaigns. If we look at this map, we can highlight quickly our untapped potential section, where we find nationalities, people that consider doing business much higher than they've got experience doing business in our country, meaning that they're easy targets, for example, for a campaign to boost their consideration and convert them into actual doing business. And that, of course, works as well with tourism or product origin as well.
Now, I've also this year done a collaboration, as we did last year for the first time, with Flourish, which enables us to do some very intriguing visualizations. What have we got in there?
Well, we have added several new best countries Flourish visualizations, and they help you showcase all of our best countries data in a gorgeous data visual format. And we really thank Flourish by Canva for helping us create these. And they're available in the Best Countries Hub as well. And I'll highlight two of my favorites in here as well. One is the opinion split, which helps you interrogate those opinion statements in that detailed disagree to agreement scale across all the countries that's covered in Best Countries. In a very easy to digest visual that also, I think, looks stunning. And another one that has great utility, I think, is our regional distribution. This helps you dive into a region and see both the spread of ranks for one of our factors, and then dive in to see which country is this, and also how a country actually moves in that region across all these different factors. Which one's your favorite, David?
I suppose I like the one that sort of gives you a great visual representation of the various different factors, and which of those factors and dimensions are the strongest. That's the one. That's the very one. But there are a whole host of visualizations. I think the really nice thing about all of them is that you start to be able to see very quickly some of the trends in the data that is actually quite difficult to do when you're just looking at it at a number perspective or on a spreadsheet. So I do urge everybody to have a good play with the visualizations. You can change the dimensions that are there, you can change the countries that are there, you can change the order of it, and you will start to glean a whole new level of insights into the 2024-25 data. Well, I think that's given everybody a pretty good feel and understanding of what is there. It is a glimpse. There are lots of different turbo pitches for you to be able to get instant insight, so you can spend much more of your time adding value to the data as opposed to creating the data, I'd suggest starting with the Country 360, which is a really great way of being able to get the whole storyline of what the data says and what the insights are. And that's just a click away from the font. Eric, thank you very much indeed. Fantastic job you've done on creating and developing not just the best countries part of the BOV font, but the entire font platform itself. Eric, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, David.
Well, we've almost come to the end of our broadcast today. What we've covered in today's webinar is just a fraction of what's available to you. Much more is available on our Best Countries website, including a summary report packed with insights. All it leaves me to do is to say a very big thank you to all of our guests from right across the world. And of course, if you need any help or assistance or questions answered, please don't hesitate to get into contact with me, David Roth, or directly with any of our contributors in today's broadcast. Many thanks to our overall project manager, Sarah Cousins, the survey team at BAV, without whom we would not have a study at all, our partners at Wharton Business School and US News, our creative director, Sir Dominic Lynch-Robinson, our video producer, Tuin, our report writer, Joe, and designer, Kay. Thank you very much indeed for watching and have a great rest of the day.